authors, and welcome back to So God Told You to Write a Book, Now What? I'm your host, Wendy Jo Cerna, and I am excited to venture into the second season of the podcast. In Season 1, I took you along with me through the process of writing, editing, and publishing my third novel, Solbakken, A Tale of Generations. I'm currently in the thick of getting my fourth novel, The Sabotage Scroll, finished up and published. But enough about me. Season 2 is going to be all about my fellow Christian authors who are launching their books. We're going to chat about the journey they took from the inception of their books to holding the finished products in their hands. Everything from how did they hear from God, to how did they find an editor or publisher or agent or whomever it was they needed to connect with to finish their particular assignment. We will talk to authors of children's books, memoirs, devotionals, self-care, and of course, fiction. So hop on board for Season 2 of So God Told You to Write a Book, Now What? I'm convinced you're going to find both inspiration and practical knowledge to help you obey the call of God on your life to create the book He has given you to create. Hey, if the author and finisher of all things told you to write a book, He believes that you can. And so do I. So come on, let's write. Welcome back, authors, and thank you for joining us for another episode of So God Told You to Write a Book, Now What? We are in episode 2 of season 2, and today we have the privilege of speaking with Sonja Anderson. Welcome to the show, Sonja.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here today.
I'm excited to have you. This is a real treat. Sonja has traditionally published a children's book, so this is my first time interviewing a children's book author, so I have some real questions for you. The name of the book is called A Christmas Wish for Little Dala Horse, a Saint Lucia Celebration. And it is published by Tyndale House, and it is beautifully illustrated. It's just a joy just to look at the book. It's stunning. This is one of the times I wish we had video, but we're audio only. But go look it up online, and it's really a beautiful, beautiful children's book. Let's get started on your journey. Well, let me say a few things about Sonja, so you know a little bit about her. Sonja and I have just met through the Northwest Christian Writers Association. So we know each other, but we're not like super tight friends. So I'm learning about Sonja as we go. She is a certified librarian and a teacher with a master's in education from Harvard University. She's taught for 3 years at an international school for boys in Tokyo, Japan. I'll bet that was interesting. Mm-hmm. And she is the author of a middle grade Adventures of Sophie Topfeather series, and currently works as an assistant librarian at a Seattle area elementary school. So she lives in the Seattle area with her husband and near to her 2 grown children. Now, Sonja, you also have, this is is it your first children's book?
It is my first picture book.
Oh, okay.
Right. The Adventures of Sophie Topfeather is middle grade novel series, so for ages 8 to 12. But this is my first foray into picture books.
Yeah,
so
that's
really
amazing.
Fun.
Yeah, because you've contributed to anthologies and devotionals, and you and your husband wrote a book together. This is true?
We did. We wrote a book about Mount Rainier National Park. It's part of the Images of America series that is those sepia-toned books that are historical in nature with a lot of photographs and blurbs. You can find them at gift shops and local historical sites across the country. We were vacationing with our daughters at Paradise Inn up at Mount Rainier National Park, and we saw all these really cool old pictures on the walls of the inn. And my husband went into the gift shop to buy one of those books, just assuming they would have one that would have some of these really interesting pictures in it. But they didn't have one. And the park ranger said, why don't you write it? And
wow.
My husband told me this on the way home from that weekend. And, it's a dangerous thing to give a writer a new idea. And we were empty nesters. It was kind of one of the reasons why we were there with our daughters at the inn vacationing. It was a summer right before the youngest one went to college also. And so we all of a sudden had this new project to do
Wow.
together. And we are both history buffs. I was a history major in college. And we found out there was an archives and an archivist that could help
Oh
us
my.
locate pictures. And since it's a national park, they were free to use commercially for what we wanted to do. So we created a proposal in line with the Images of America series and wrote it. And a year and a half later, we had this amazing book.
That is so cool. I love that. How
Yeah.
serendipitous to
Yeah, it's called Mount Rainier's Historic Inns and Lodges, if
yeah. Oh,
anybody's interested.
right. Well, around here, it would be very fun to see because it's so beautiful up there at Paradise. I mean, it is aptly named for sure. So let's
Yes.
get into your Christmas wish for Little Dala Horse. Tell me, how did this start for you?
It started for me actually working at my school library. The kindergarten teachers over the holidays had a series of reading the Gingerbread Man stories. There's so many different versions. There's Runaway Tortilla and Runaway Dreidel and Runaway Matzo Ball Boy
Yeah.
and Ninja Bread Man and all of these. And I was checking them in and reading them kind of as I was going and in a January after the holidays. And I thought, there should be a Swedish version of this story. And I quickly wrote one up. It was kind of a madcap, adventure that was like kind of disrupting a Lucia pageant with this runaway
Ah,
pepper
uh-huh.
cracker cookie. And I also had a Dala horse in there. And I sent it to my agent, and she got back to me in 10 minutes and said, I'm part Swedish, or I'm Swedish too, and I would love to do a Swedish Christmas picture book. But she thought I should go a different direction with it
Hmm.
and focus on the Dala horse and focus on the Lucia pageant and kind of a quieter, more heartfelt version of this story. So
I see.
the original idea was kind of this just gingerbread man story, but I am so grateful that she helped me take it in a different direction because it has just taken on so much more meaning to so many more members of my family. So it's become a beautiful story with lots of layers
Yeah.
of meaning and fun
Yeah.
with the little tomtas to search for
Yeah.
on the pages that are hidden in the scenes. And so it's just been a joy. And I'm so grateful for my agent kind of listening to her instincts and encouraging me to kind of think about it in a fresh way.
Yeah. Okay, so question. So most of my listeners, we have gone through indie publishing and we've gone through hybrid publishing, but we've not had a traditionally published book on the podcast yet. So let's start with how did you get an agent?
So this is a great story, and I would really encourage all of you, no matter what your genre is, to find conferences that you can attend in your field. Even if they're not a Christian conference, and you might be appalled by some of what you hear, which is kind of the case of how I got my agent. I had been invited to be on a local success panel at the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators conference that was in our region. And I'd been to this conference a number of times, and I was just thrilled to be asked to be on this panel. It was because my second Sophie Topfeather book had been published and the Mount Rainier book had been published kind of in the past year. And so they invited me to speak. And in the panel time, I said something about the series being a Christian series, like the series for children was a Christian series. And after that panel, I was waiting in line for lunch, and I was talking to someone who came up to me and said, I was so happy that you said you were a Christian because I just felt like there was nothing here at this conference for me.
Mm.
And I started kind of complaining, maybe a little bit too loudly, that she was right, that there had been some things said on an earlier panel that I was just appalled by. I was happy to find a kind of a friend. And I said, I don't know why I come to these conferences because I don't think anybody here would ever take anything that I write.
Mm.
And this woman, bless her heart, in front of me in line, turned around and said, there is a brand new Christian agent in Tacoma. Her
Mm.
name is Adria Getz. And I don't know how Maria Marshall knew about her, but She, bless her heart, told me about her. I immediately, upon going home, wrote to her, sent her a story. And within 2 weeks, I heard back the devastating news that she had another client who was submitting something similar and she
Oh,
couldn't take me on. But she wondered what else I had.
yeah.
So I sent her everything I had. And because I'd been writing picture books for a long time at that point and the novels, I find it really fun to write short stories or devotionals like for Keys for Kids magazine. At
Yeah.
the same time, I'm working on a long project because long
Okay.
projects are long and
Yeah.
they take years before they
Yes.
might ever see the light of day. And it's very encouraging to do short projects, especially devotionals that you get feedback on right away.
That's
And then
good.
picture books are just fun. So I've been writing, playing with those manuscripts, kind of like as fun time. But I had a body of things I could send to her. So she wrote back and she said, I cannot take you on now. I am new. She had been an agent for a year at that point.
Mm.
She had had 4 sales. She was very, very excited about that. But she said, do you want to meet for coffee since you live in the Seattle area? So we did. We met. And she took a look at my novels and everything I'd done. She goes, I can't believe you did all this without an agent.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, you do it long enough, you keep
Yep.
submitting, something's going to work. But we developed a relationship and she was interested in coming to Northwest Christian Writers Association. And so over the next several years, we had invited her a couple times to be on our faculty.
Yeah.
And but she had read everything I had done. So I just popped in, a conference room when she was waiting for her next appointment at one of our conferences and said, how are you? Are you enjoying the conference? And she said, yeah, what are you working on? And I just told her an idea off the cuff that I had been kind of playing with. And wouldn't you know it, like 2 years later, and I started following her on Twitter. And like 2 years later, she posted a tweet that made me think of a story that she might have read that I had done, but now it was something she was looking for. So I wrote her a message and reminded her about this story. And she wrote back right away and said, I can't take on any more Christmas books, which is ironic because that's
Yes.
what the first book is that made it. But she said, what about that idea? And she named it by name, the
Wow.
idea I'd been working on. So I dusted that off and I got it ready to submitted it to her. And 2 weeks later, she asked me for the call to consider representation, which is so funny because I had just told my critique group, I'm done with picture books. They never work out. They're heartbreaking. I'm wasting my time submitting them. I'm just not going to do it anymore. And that's when God really stepped in. And so to make a long story short, I would never have heard about Adria if I hadn't gone to that secular conference, but in my field. And I've always felt that Northwest Christian Writers Association, my Christian writing group, they really help remind me why I'm writing.
Yeah.
But I think it's important, especially if you have dreams of publishing traditionally, that you understand what the standards are in your field. What are kids expecting to read? What are parents expecting to buy? What's the quality? What's the level?
Yeah.
And those kind of genre specific, like in my case, children's writing specific conferences have always really reminded me to keep my sights really high and to keep reading books, which is easy to do. I'm a librarian in my school, so I see all the new books coming in. I see what kids like to read.
Yeah.
I see what they think is funny, what they want to check out over and over and over again. And all of that kind of informs my writing.
Yeah. That's an amazing story. I'm reminded of the scripture that says his paths are beyond tracing out. Like how he connected all those dots for you is beautiful. And then that she winds up having Swedish heritage is like icing on the cake.
Which I had no idea. Her last name isn't Swedish. She's married, so she has a married name. But I'm so grateful that she has taken me on.
Yeah. So when you first submitted the idea for this story, how long did it take from beginning to, having hand-on copy of your book?
It took almost exactly 3.5 years.
Okay.
I got the idea in January, wrote it. We went back and forth writing drafts for about 6 months. And then she started submitting it. And several of them said no kind of right away. And I've learned recently that holiday books and books with inanimate objects are 2 of the hardest things to sell and in picture books. And mine is both.
Yeah.
Which is also a sign to me that God has really been behind this book. So we weren't surprised that several publishers said no, but then Tyndale said yes. And we learned later that the editor was actually went to her computer to type a rejection letter
Hmm.
about this book and found herself saying, no, I want to try. I want to try to get it through acquisitions. And I just feel like that's the power of prayer. At
That
this
is.
point, my critique group, my family, my Sunday school class, like I just had this feeling that this book was special. And so a lot of people were praying about this acquisitions process. I just really believe that's kind of what moved the needle,
Yeah, that's
away from
amazing.
no.
Yeah, yeah. So this is the process. Your
Mm.
agent shops it around to different publishing houses. Is this how it goes?
Mm-hmm.
And she specifically speaks to editors in what the children's book department of Tyndale or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Right. She is actively developing relationships with editors at different publishing houses. She represents both Christian and secular books. And so she's got kind of a wide network of places she submits and always has a couple of rounds, there's like 6 or so publishers she'll submit to first. And then if
Mm-hmm.
none of those work out, she's got another tier that she has in mind. And I can see it all on a spreadsheet and I can see their responses. She types in
Okay.
their responses. I always kind of know what's going on. But the journey for this was pretty interesting because even after Tyndale said they wanted it, which was pretty quickly, maybe after like 8 months from idea to that
Yeah.
time when they said yes.
Yeah.
And it was 2 years ago today, actually, as
Hmm.
we're recording this on
Yeah.
September 20th, 2025, that the contract was countersigned by Tyndale. Like I had signed it and
Okay.
then they had to
Okay.
officially sign it. And,
Yeah.
the process was going to start to find the illustrator and all of that. But I remember it so well because it was 2 years ago today that my dad passed away. And he was
Oh,
one of the inspirations for
yeah.
the character of the woodcarver and who became a widow woodcarver. But she carved kind of in memory of her husband. And so there's this poignant aspect to the story that really resonates with me because my dad was a dentist who turned to wood carving
Yeah.
in his retirement. And a Dala horse was the first thing he ever carved for me in
Oh,
honor of
wow.
my Swedish heritage. He himself was Dutch. And the last words he said to me on this earth that I could clearly understand the day before he died was, "That's so wonderful to hear the news that the contract had been
Oh,
signed and the project was moving forward." He was so happy
that's
about it.
beautiful. That is a beautiful, beautiful story. I know when I published my, I don't know, what Solbakken, it's all based on my dad's Norwegian heritage and the little town that he grew up in and everything. And I just got it published, and he passed away like within a month or so after that. But so it's very poignant when you realize that you get to sort of carry on the imprint that they put on your life and actually print it so other people can be impacted by it is pretty powerful stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I love that generational stuff. So I have more questions about the
Sure.
publishing. Okay, well, let's just start there. So you get the acquisition, you get it, the contract signed, and then they connect you with the illustrator, or how does that work?
They do. In fact, I want to tell you, they sent out this lovely program or like bulletin, sort of a booklet
Yeah.
of what to expect after that point.
Ah.
And it has a history of Tyndale itself, it has pictures and blurbs about all the main people in the team.
Mm-hmm.
Then it has a section on project timeline, and it has timelines for text-only books. It has timelines for picture books, and I knew what to expect all along the way.
That's
And
wonderful.
they followed the timeline beautifully.
Hmm.
I just couldn't get over the fact that I could, look at the timeline and know, okay, this is what's happening now, even though it doesn't feel like anything
Yeah.
is happening to me. And I can expect to get like a Zoom call about illustrators, in the next few months or
Yeah.
whatever. And I was just floored by the attention to detail. One of the first things they sent me was a questionnaire about kind of how I envisioned the art, like
Okay.
what kind of
Yeah.
style. The last question was really intriguing. It was, what do I fear the most in this process?
Huh.
And for me, it was that they were going to get the Dala horse's color wrong because
Yes.
Swedish
Yes.
Christmas is really like orangey red,
It's very specific. Uh-huh.
very specific. And I thought if they get the color of the horse wrong, if it's like a real Christmas red,
Yes.
what we think of as a Christmas red, then all the Swedes will take one look at the book and say, she doesn't know what she's doing,
That's right. That's right.
And so every time I had any conversation with them about the art from that point on, they would always end it with, this is a picture of a Dala horse. We know it's the wrong color, or say something, we are aware of the color. Like, don't worry about the color. And they really nailed it. And I had sent them some pictures of my daughter as Santa Lucia another daughter as like a peppercocker kid, a gingerbread cookie kid, part of this Lucia pageant, so they could get an idea for the costumes. And then the artistic designer at Tyndale took it even further. She created whole portfolios that we were able to go through as a team of like 6 different illustrators that she had found that reminded her in some way of her vision for the book. And by the time we were done with going through those portfolios, I was like sobbing because I'm just like, we can't go wrong. It's so beautiful. All the different illustrators, but this one was very special. And I was just thrilled when Agnieszka in Poland said she would do it. And I think just together, we've created something pretty special.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And I was looking through it again last night. And the little parade of all the characters in the snow at night going towards, of all the Santa Lucia, led by the little Santa Lucia girl with the candles on wreath. And I had to stop there for a while and just pause and soak it all in because it's really beautiful. And of course, it reminded me of a lot of my Norwegian Scandinavian heritage too, but it was really spot on as far as the costumes and the feel of that beautiful pageantry that comes at Advent. It's before Christmas, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. It always kicked off Advent for us. In the book, I have like an author's note to that effect that, this was such a beautiful way as my kids participated in this every year from the time they were very small at our church, which had been founded by Swedes in Sweden. And now it's a very diverse congregation. This is kind of the one nod to its Swedish ancestry every year. And it's the most beautiful service, which knocked my socks off when I first was as a single person going to this church. I had never seen anything as beautiful as this in my life, and was so thrilled that I was able to raise a family there and they were able to grow up doing this. And I could see it was kind of a coming of age service for the kids every year where, they moved on from one part of it to another, and just very special.
So for our listeners who aren't familiar with, who is Santa Lucia?
So Santa Lucia is basically an Italian Saint Lucia, who lived in like the 280 something in Sicily, Italy, during a time of Christian persecution. The story goes that her mother became very ill when she was a young woman, and when Lucia was a young woman, and she prayed earnestly for God to heal her mother. And God answered her prayer, and her mother was healed. And she had made a vow saying that she was engaged at the time, and she vowed to God that she would give up her dowry to serve the poor if he healed her mother. And she followed through on that. The story is that she would go into like the hiding places, the catacombs of where Christians were hiding because they were being persecuted, using a crown of candles so that her hands would be free in these dark spaces so she could carry food to them. And she did use her dowry for this purpose, and her fiancé was enraged. And the story is that the fiancé turned her into authorities, and she was murdered for this kind act. How she became so special to the Swedes is a whole other story. And part of the legend there, nobody really knows, is a story that could have been brought by missionaries over time. But there's a legend that one time this village was starving during a very difficult winter, and a boat came across the lake with a woman in the bow of the boat with a crown of candles bringing food supplies to the village and saved their lives. So whatever the truth is of the stories, we don't really know, but we do know that she is a symbol of like hope and light at the beginning of a very dark winter in Sweden. And so she's really captured the imagination of Swedes.
I was in Croatia a few years ago, and we stayed in the town of Split, and our Airbnb was literally like part of Diocletian's palace. Diocletian being the Roman emperor who I think is the only Roman emperor to actually just retire and not be murdered or he retired to Croatia, which is where he grew up, but his palace is still there fairly intact. It's amazing. But we were getting the tour of this Diocletian's palace, and I heard for the first time from it because I'd heard, of course, Santa Lucia from the Scandinavian perspective, but I heard it from the perspective of the persecuted Christians in that time because Diocletian was vicious with, I mean, he murdered thousands of Christians in Croatia when he moved back there to build this enormous palace. And I heard the story of Santa Lucia there. They brought it up how she had come into these catacombs and into these very dark places with her candles on her head
Mhm.
to distribute food and water and to care for those who were being very heavily persecuted at the time. It was very moving to be standing in those places that were, there's so much history there, hundreds and
I
hundreds
bet.
of years of history. And it was very, very powerful. So it brought new levels of appreciation for Santa Lucia to me. So let me ask this. So when you do a picture book, there's a lot of people involved. So you have your agent, you have a whole team at Tyndale
Mhm. Mhm.
assigned to your book,
Yes.
and then they connect you with the illustrator.
Mhm.
And then what happens?
So the illustrator was working with the artistic designer. The artistic designer had the book laid out basically of what spreads were going to be double spreads, like that beautiful
Yes.
Lucia procession in the middle. And also, I think one of my very favorite spreads is also a double spread of the whole village coming
Yes.
through the snowy
Yeah.
village towards the church,
Uh-huh.
following the Lucia procession into the church. And you can just feel in both of those spreads, like the chill of the air and the
Yep.
snow, it's so beautiful. And I just love that vision of the whole community coming together.
Hmm.
But there are other pages that have a lot of white space with like spots of, the Dala horse falling onto the floor
Yeah.
or, these different things. And that was all planned out by the artistic designer, Jackie,
Okay.
who's amazing. And so they worked together to kind of lay out the book. And then the illustrator brought it to life. And at some point, I was able to see like the cover. In a
Yeah.
Zoom chat, they showed me the cover and kind of how it was going. And after they had sent me kind of a PDF of all the art that had been done, they wanted to make sure it was like correct, that if I had any thoughts,
Yeah.
so I did have some input along the way. And
Yeah.
that's where I was able to input the suggestion of the little tiny tomtas,
Yes. Tell people what
which
those
was so
are who
fun.
aren't Scandinavian.
Yes. So Scandinavian gnomes have several different names,
Yes.
like Lise and Tomta, and there's some other ones as well that I'm forgetting. But historically, and kind of by legend, they're these small creatures that help around the farm.
Hmm.
They protect the hen house from the foxes, or they help in different ways. And all they really ask for, which doesn't play into this book at all, but on Christmas Eve, they just want a bowl of rice porridge. And that's basic rice pudding. That's all they want.
Keeps them
And
going. Yeah.
keeps them going. And if you forget that, oh man, that's when things can start to go wrong on
Right.
your farm,
Yeah.
I guess. But so I just had this idea that kids, they love the Where's Waldo books, in my
Yeah.
library, and finding Where's Waldo, finding the little Waldo character. And so I thought, wouldn't that be fun? And when I saw the original illustrations, they had very cleverly put like a tomta, one of these little gnomes, kind of in the corners of some pages that had Swedish glossary words. Now, there aren't that many Swedish words in the book, but there are a few. And they did this really cute thing with these, gnomes in the corner
Yes.
holding
I
like a
love that.
flag,
Yeah.
um, instead of like a glossary list in the back or something. So I thought, oh, that's great. But it didn't quite capture what I'd been hoping for, of these little hidden ones, that kids
Yeah.
could hunt for and find.
Hmm.
And I wasn't sure that they'd do both, but I did make that suggestion at that point, and they loved the idea and went back to the illustrator, and then she incorporated these absolutely adorable ones.
Yes.
Like, I just love hunting, for them myself, and seeing like the little female one like sweeping up the wood shavings and stuff
Yeah.
like that, it's so adorable what they did.
It's very fun. I do this. I have a painting crafty business that I do too. And I go to in Portland every year, they have this thing called Scan Fair. And it's all things Scandinavian. It's a huge arts, crafts, food event at the Portland Convention Center. And it's very, I mean, if you're Scandinavian, it's very fun. It's
Mhm.
feeds your Scandinavian soul. But they have a little gnome contest where every vendor can it's a tiny little gnome and you hide it somewhere in your booth. And then kids come around and they love looking for them. I mean, they're scouring their parents are looking at other things, but the kids want to know where the gnome is because they get prizes if they find all of them, anything. So it's very fun. So I
Oh, I
really
love that
appreciated
so
it.
much.
Yeah, you should come down.
Yeah.
You would really enjoy it.
Hmm.
Um, so I love hearing about all this process. I think it's very helpful for people to hear the traditional publishing process. It's long journey and there's lots of people involved, but if you're going to write a book, it's going to be a long journey anyway. So it just depends on how the Lord leads you and the connections he makes for you
Hmm.
along the line. I think everybody has a path to take, and
Hmm.
I love hearing about your path. So, what would you say in particular obstacles for you that you had to overcome in this whole journey?
Well, I think when I originally submitted the Swedish gingerbread man story, and my agent came back to me, I kind of joked to my critique group that I'll send her something and she'll write back, I love it. Let's change it completely. And that's not exactly what she says. And
Yeah.
she is so brilliant and so insightful that I do listen to like every single thing she says. But I was kind of dismayed, I guess, at the first moment of that need to change directions. I thought, oh, can't this just be simple for a change?
Right.
Can't we just go with the first idea?
Yeah.
The world needs a Swedish madcap gingerbread
Yes.
story, And so I was just like, oh, because it's more work to really rethink it and
Yes,
to,
it is.
really work it. So I guess that was really an obstacle where I just had to swallow, my own feelings and just say, okay, she is so smart. She knows the market. She knows what is unique, what will sell. And I need to go with that. And I believe that God really had a better plan than,
Yeah.
than
Right.
my little idea at the beginning. So just that. And then I think with the idea that publishers don't really take a lot of holiday stories
Yeah.
because there's a short window for
Yeah,
marketing
yeah.
them and for customers to buy them. And then inanimate objects like a carved wooden character,
Mhm.
is not an easy character maybe to relate to. And so the fact that, we were able to overcome those inherent like problems, quote
Yeah.
unquote, with the story, just that, yeah. But no,
Yeah.
those were the main
Yeah. But I
obstacles.
also love that you've mentioned several times your critique group. So some people don't know it. Can you explain to us what a critique group is and how you got involved in one?
Sure. Originally, I got involved through Northwest Christian Writers Association with some folks that I met there that we wrote for children and wanted to get together, like to share manuscripts via
Yeah.
email.
Okay.
And we would meet in person, but pre-pandemic. And the group kind of would fall apart. We didn't have a good critical mass. People couldn't always make it.
Yeah.
But this group really solidified during the pandemic. It is some current members of NCWA. There's about 5 of us, and my twin sister, who's a writer. And once we were on Zoom, she lives in Connecticut. She could join us. And
Lovely.
a former member of NCWA who moved to
Yeah.
Pittsburgh during the pandemic, she's integral part of our group. And so what we do is we meet once a week and we share manuscripts when we're at that point of drafting a manuscript. We can go for months without sharing any actual work because we're in different stages
Yeah.
where we're not ready to share it or we're just submitting. So we share ideas about for the ones that aren't. I'm the only one that's agented. So the ones that are looking for an agent, that they're in that part of the process,
Uh-huh.
they share news about agents that they hear about that have just opened up. They share about Query Tracker, which is a way to keep track of your queries and to find agents in their search,
Yeah.
system that represent what you write. So they help each other. We pray for each other, and we share. Probably very importantly, at the end of every hour-long session where we meet once a week, we share our goals for the next week.
Hmm.
And so we're always thinking about what we can do to move forward, whether it's in the submission stage, drafting stage. There's so many different
Yeah.
stages and we just help each other through all of it or
Yeah.
through rejections that
Yep.
we've gotten. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really powerful to have a built-in cheerleading section
Mm.
and
Oh, yes.
accountability.
Hmm.
Because it is writing, as we always say, is a solo journey to find community in a way that keeps you moving forward is super helpful.
Oh, I couldn't do it without him. I
Yeah.
really couldn't.
So have you always wanted to be an author? Is this kind of, I mean, you're a librarian, so I know you love books, but
Right. I've always, probably from the time I could put crayon to paper, I've wanted to be a writer. My mom actually even sent me a book that she found when she was moving out of her house and into a retirement community. She found this book that was folded into quarters
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
tied together with red yarn
Yeah.
that just said on the cover, Sonja's book, and backwards letters and all.
Yep.
And inside was just a big tree with some like crawling creatures and flying creatures. It just made me laugh because my first published book was Sophie's Quest, which has a big tree as a center
Mm.
piece and an owl and her good buddy Timley the mouse, crawling creature. And I thought, wow, God is so good.
Isn't that funny? I love that. Been inside of you your whole life, and now it's coming to
Hmm.
fruition, on a much later stage in life. That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
So, but your book has just been out. I mean, just a couple weeks?
Just September 9th. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So we're
11
fresh into
days.
it. So
Hmm.
what are you hearing back from people? Have you gotten to that point yet or?
I have. It's so exciting. There's friends, people from college, people that I just know online, people from all over that are now posting pictures of the books that they had pre-ordered and telling me what their grandchildren have thought of it or their
Yes.
children and how much they love it. And that's really special. And another thing that feedback that I've gotten that I am just clinging to is that the school library journal, one of the most respected trade journals for children's books, gave my book a starred review. And
Wow.
that is huge because
Mm-hmm.
it means that now it's in libraries. Like so far, it's in about 50 libraries that I know of through a World Catalog, worldcat.org it's called.
Yeah.
You can see which libraries it's in. King County Library ordered 15 copies,
Nice.
the same day that I showed them a copy of the
Yeah.
book in one of the branches. Seattle Public Libraries ordered 10. It's
Great.
just it's kind of the word of mouth thing and the kind of a spark that
Yeah.
when they gave it the verdict of a wonderful addition to any library, that kind of gives me the permission to go to public schools, to read it to every class in my
Yeah.
own school that the
Yeah.
librarian has invited me to do that and
Yeah.
and to feel like I'm not infringing on church and state or trying to
Yeah.
push a Christian
Yeah.
message. But, when School Library Journal gives it a stamp of approval like that, it's huge. It's kind of funny, but like 2 weeks ago, right before the book came out, I was going through this just intense fear. Like, you know, putting a book out there is scary.
Yes,
And
it
I don't
is.
know if people realize that, like, because you put so much of yourself
Yes.
into it. And so many people have helped, especially with this one with Tyndale. Linda Howard, the former publisher for the children's branch of Tyndale, she's now working for David C. Cook. But she said in a workshop one time that they put $60,000 into every picture book by the time all is said and done between
Oh.
her job, the
Yeah, yeah.
acquisitions editor, the editor who helped write. So that was the next thing. There was an acquisitions editor, then there was an editor who helped me with the text of the book, the artistic designer, the marketing person, the PR person who's connected me to like articles to write and a radio interview and
Yeah.
things like that. And then there's the sales team
Yeah.
and there's interns with all of these. And I was blown away by how much, because they didn't pay me $60,000. I can tell you
Right.
that. It's like mostly, I got a nice advance, but not like
Yes.
that. And so it's like all of these people. And that's when I really want to encourage everyone who's thinking about writing picture books, especially, do everything in your power to write to the level of what's expected in traditionally published books and to try to seek a traditional publishing contract. Because even though all of us, we could probably find a nice illustrator, we could,
Yep.
get an editor, we can pay for those things. But that is a lot of expertise that Tyndale has poured into this book, and it's really hard to duplicate that as an indie author.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there are times when an indie picture book makes perfect sense. And I've
Yep.
helped people with those books, where it's a family story that they want to share with their own children, and they really don't care if it sells more than 10 copies,
Right.
or they just
Yeah.
give away to their family. And those are perfect projects for
Yeah.
indie publishing. But if you have visions of being like in public libraries, in school libraries, they really do not take self-published books, or even hybrid published books. And so you really need to put your mind to doing whatever it takes to get into with an agent
Yeah.
or traditional publisher.
That's a
And
good
there are
encouragement.
ways you can do it.
Yeah.
You can subscribe to magazines like Children's Book Insider. They have kind of what's called an Above the Slush opportunity every month. It's an online magazine, online writing community. There's a community dedicated for picture books called 12 by 12 with Julie Headland leading it. And it's a fabulous community that really helps you level up your writing to that level.
Okay. Can you repeat those two? 12 by 12 and
Sure.
what was the other?
12 by 12 and Children's Book Insider.
Children's Book Insider. So if you're interested in getting a traditionally published children's book, look those things up. The resources are out there, but you do need to do some homework because all of it's a learning curve. That's what I found. The whole thing is a learning curve. So you have to be willing to say, I don't know. Help me to find the next thing I need to know, and just go step by step.
Right. And I had been writing picture books for, at least 10 years before this one got accepted. And we had one other project go to the final acquisitions meeting that did not make it. And I think we have revised it. We're going to send it out again at some point. But you have to be willing to really keep learning, keep playing, keep reading what's being published right now, because when you see what kids expect and what parents expect with the quality of the art, the quality of the writing, that'll help you a lot to move your story in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this. So we need to wrap up here in just a few minutes, but I really want to hear, did you have any, particular God moments or scriptures that when, like you said, right before it's publishing, suddenly you get this crazy kind of anxiety of, oh no, now my baby's going out into the world. And you get hit by those things all along the way, different things. But I was wondering if there were any particular scriptures that helped you in this journey.
Well, right at the end, the verse from Ephesians 3:20-21 came to me, and it just seems so apropos for this journey of this book. It says, "Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us, to him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever." And this book does honor the church, through the generations, the stories from Lucia, which, are from like 280 AD, something, the church that my kids grew up in, and just how God is able to give us even more than we can imagine. I mean, as writers, we use our imaginations. We think maybe we've got a decent imagination, but God has a bigger one. God has a plan. And so every experience is different. When I first wrote my children's novel, that felt like a call from God, like through a megaphone. I don't know if any of you have ever had this experience, but it felt like God was saying, do not pass go, do not collect $200, write the book. And I felt the sense of urgency and a lot of fear too. At that point, I prayed for a year, making sure I had really heard from God. Right thing, I asked Christian friends, like, is this a good idea? Should I write this book? Because it had a potential to be controversial. And so it was a Holy Land quest, and it involved kids, or the characters, meeting characters from other world religions so that we could understand each other better.
Yeah.
My school that I work with and that my kids went to is a very diverse community. And my daughter had an argument on the playground about God. And it was like, whose God is biggest? The kind of argument that a kindergartner might have.
Yep.
And I thought of this book that could help kids navigate and have kind of story around who God is really, and not answering the question of who God is biggest necessarily, but just who is God and can we find him? And he is seeking us.
Yeah.
and waiting to be found. And so anyway, I prayed through that, and I just really felt like God calling me in such a way that when I finally sat down at the computer, I like literally said out loud, okay, I'll do it, but you have to be with me this entire time
Yes.
because I don't know
Yes.
what I'm doing. And I had been a big reader my whole life, but it's very different to read a book than to sit down and stare at a blank page and say, okay, wait a minute, now what?
Yep. Yeah. And did you experience, though, like I remember that moment too of saying, all right, already, I'll do it. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why you'd ask me to do it. But I experienced like he meets you in that moment
Mm-hmm.
in such a beautiful way. It's a little bit, I mean, I've known the Lord a lot of years, but in that moment, he meets you in this, like, your creative partner mode. And it's really beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's stunning. It's an amazing adventure with God.
Yes.
You know, if you never want to be bored a moment again in your life, do a project with God
Right?
because it is an amazing adventure.
It
And
is.
I am so grateful for this opportunity and, for all the books that I've written. Just what a joy, to do a project that God is asking you to do,
Yeah.
and the way he's changed me through it and helped me to depend on him, to
Yeah.
really know how dependable he is,
Yes.
how faithful he is. And it's just deepened my prayer life. Like I've talked about being afraid,
Yeah.
it just drives me to my knees every time, when we are vulnerable and we kind of put ourselves out there. It's scary, but to know that, yes, God is with me. He's helped me do this, and he will meet this moment in a way that will bring him
Yes.
honor and glory.
Yeah.
And it's just, it gives me goosebumps. It's just so
Yeah.
exciting.
I love it. I went to the University of Washington and there was graffiti, not as much as there is now, but there was my favorite graffiti ever was across, I don't remember what it was, but it said, born again or bored again.
Ooh.
I was like, oh, that made me stop and think for a minute. Like, if I'm bored, am I really following the Lord? Because I've kind of found that whenever he actually really asks me, and I know it's him, it's always slightly terrifying, sometimes really terrifying, but it's
Mhm.
always, there's an edge to it of, this is not boring. It's
Exactly.
terrifying. Yes.
Yeah.
So okay, let's wrap it up with, if you had
Mm.
one piece of advice that you could give somebody who's specifically thinking about doing a children's book and they haven't really stepped out yet, what would you say to them?
I would say to go to your public library and ask the librarians for help. Say, what are 10 or 20 or 30 picture books that kids are reading right now that are newly published that have really captured kids' imaginations, and
Yeah.
check those out and read them, study them, try to figure out how they made it through the publishing process. What was it that told these publishers that this was a book that they should put like $60,000 into?
Yeah.
What was it about these stories that captures kids' imagination? And kind of think about your own project in those terms of like, how can I get this idea that I have, kind of a kernel of idea across that, so it'll be fun, meaningful. A lot of writers that want to write for children that I've met, especially Christian writers, we have such a burden on our heart for kids,
Hmm.
and we want to kind of teach them what we've learned. But so many of those writers immediately kind of write a story that has a wise, like, grandparent telling the kid that they need to appreciate this or that,
Yeah.
or to do this or that. And kids just want to have fun.
Yeah.
They want to look for the little Swedish gnomes on the pages. They,
Yep.
they want to have fun. And they are willing to have a meaningful, moving experience, but they want to get there in a fun, entertaining
Yeah.
way. And so, especially if you're writing about kind of a family story that you want not just to be for your family, but like for a broader audience, think about the kernels of truth or ideas in that story that you really want to pass on, and then think if there's a really fun way you can do it.
Yeah.
Like you can honor tradition and family without sticking to, this is exactly what happened in my
Yeah. Yeah.
family.
Yeah. Yeah.
You need to be able to think in terms of the audience and what they want to read. You want a kid to be able to, when the book is over, you want them to say, oh, again,
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
read it again.
Yeah.
You don't want them to say, oh, they wanted me to learn
Yeah.
that.
Right.
And then
Right.
they throw it on the floor and never want to read it again.
Yeah,
Yeah. So really think about the kids in your life and what they want to
that's
read.
good. That's very good. I love that advice. Thank you for that. All right. In closing, is there anything else you wanted to talk about specifically before we wrap this up? Do we miss anything? I loved hearing all of it. I mean, it's really quite an adventure, and I've learned along the way too. I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. Just that God can give us good gifts,
Yeah.
and we can take those gifts and give them to others with an open hand. And I'm so grateful for the gift from God that this book is to me.
Hmm.
And a major theme in the story, which we haven't really talked about, is
I know.
give is
Sorry.
learning how to give a gift of the heart.
Yes.
The little Dala horse learns to make a new friend, even though he's unfinished. He's plain. He doesn't have his swishes and swirls and dots and dabs yet that make him a beautiful Swedish Dala horse. And in the process of trying to put himself out there and make this new friend and give this new friend the courage she needs to do what she needs to do in the pageant, he becomes a little bit broken.
Hmm.
And so the idea that we have gifts of the heart we can give, and every character in the story, as we read it, has a gift of the heart that
Yes.
they give to others. And so that is a major theme, and that we don't need to be finished. We don't need to be
Perfect. Yeah.
perfect, because
Hmm.
none of us are finished. None
Right.
of us are perfect. We are
Right.
all growing in the Lord if we allow him to work in our lives. And he can use us at whatever stage we're at
Yes.
to bring others closer to him through
Yeah.
our writing.
I love that in the story where he gets a little broken ear. I'm like, oh, I wasn't expecting that part. But it's perfect. It's like you're right, that understanding that we don't have to be perfect to get our gifts out into the world. And sometimes our imperfection is exactly what other people need to see for their encouragement. So, okay, so where can we find your book? Where can we buy this beautiful book?
So the book, I'm happy to say, is available just about anywhere.
Okay.
Swedish gift shops, if you are Swedish and you have a favorite Swedish store that you go to or catalog, they can easily order it through the Swedish distributor that
Ah,
they use called Scandisk. You can go to any bookstore and they can easily order it through Ingram, and I'm not sure what
yeah.
other distributors it's on, but they have found it easily. And it's online anywhere you can think of, christianbooks.com, Bookdelico, Amazon, of course,
Yeah.
bookshop.org that
Yeah.
helps local bookstores. When you buy it online through bookshop.org, it helps local bookstores that you can name. So it's really available
Yeah.
anywhere.
Okay. Pick
Yes.
it up and really to really appreciate this book, you need to pick it up and hold it and look at it. Even the front cover is sparkly with snow. It's gorgeous. It's really irresistible. I bought a copy and I'm like, I don't know which little kid to give it to. Honestly, at this point, I'm going to have to get a few more, I think, because,
Okay.
that's whole Scandinavian thing. So,
Right.
yeah. So thank you so much for spending the time, Sonja. I really appreciated it. I've learned and I'm excited for your book. It's a lovely, beautifully illustrated, but beautifully written. The whole story is very touching and worthwhile for any kid in your life and for you too, I think.
Thank you so much. I really
Yeah,
appreciate that, Wendy Jo, and I have just loved being here today. Thank you so much.
you're very welcome. Well, that wraps it up for episode 2 of season 2 with my guest, Sonja Anderson. We're talking about her children's book, A Christmas Wish for Little Dala Horse, a Saint Lucia celebration. It's a lovely, heartwarming story. I think you should pick it up, give it to a bunch of kids for Christmas. Sure love and appreciate you. Shalom, shalom.